What's up, YouTube? Welcome back, y'all. Welcome back. Today, I'm gonna do a video, a reaction to Godzilla's fight record in the Heisei era. I always wanted to know that, because as much as I watch Godzilla, I should already know his record. Because he doesn't get whooped much. And there's probably one fight where he got whooped. Well, no, there's two. Because he lost to Space Godzilla at one point in time. If you were to combine it all, he would have lost to Space Godzilla, King Kong in the original, I think he lost one time in Final Wars toward the end when he was losing his power, but they had to give him energy to fight Kaiser Ghidorah, I believe. He lost to Mothra at one time when he was fighting the sea monster. He went one-on-one with Mothra. No, even though that was like a small little scramble, would they count as a loss? But yeah, I've always wanted that anyway. I always wanted to know. But there's a guy, a YouTube channel called Sci-Fi Explain. Put the link down in the description to find their channel, and they have wonderful videos on anything Godzilla, basically anything sci-fi. And I became a fan of theirs. I watched a lot of their stuff. And I just love them, and anything monstrous, anything aliens, because I grew up on it. But yeah, anyway, I'm just gonna get into the video. So let's get into it. Give me a minute. Let me scramble some stuff. All right, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey guys, so without a doubt, Godzilla is one of the toughest monsters to ever grace the movie screen. With that said, however, every kaiju can have an off day, and even the strongest have a few losses on their fighting record. The Big G is not immune to losing a fight, or even dying for that matter. Yet of all the kaiju that make up the Toho film universe, it should be of no surprise that Godzilla would have the most kaiju fight experience. His win-loss record is one that is so vast that I'm going to have to break it down by the eras in order to take it all in. So here you have it, guys, the first of my kaiju fight history series, wins and losses, starting off where it all began with Godzilla from the Showa era. Before we start, I just want to note that this is a Godzilla vs. other kaiju fight series, so I won't be counting battles where Godzilla confronts the humans or their weapons, except for the large-scale ones like Mechagodzilla. We're also going to focus on the second Godzilla of the era, seeing as how the first was killed at the film's climax and never faced off with any other kaiju. So with that out of the way, let's dive in.
1954.
It's pretty hard to convince any fan of the Godzilla series that Godzilla Raids Again isn't one of the lesser films of the era. Even though the movie was a bit of a rushed mess, one has to remember that if it wasn't for Godzilla Raids Again or Godzilla's counterattack, that we wouldn't have the Godzilla series that we know and love. After all, it was here where Godzilla had his first battle with another monster. And in that first battle, we would get an introduction to the kaiju that would go on to become somewhat of a sidekick for Godzilla with Anguirus. In their first meeting, we would only see them fight briefly before falling into the ocean, so I'm going to call this one a draw with no points awarded. But Anguirus would return and attack the Big G once again for the film's climax, leading to an overly fast-paced fight that would give Godzilla his first kaiju fighting victory. After biting and tearing open the neck of Anguirus, Godzilla would then toss him aside and light his corpse ablaze to ensure the death of the monster. A strong entry onto the fight record with 1 win and 0 losses. 7 years after the release of
I remember
Godzilla's
that.
counterattack in 1955, Godzilla would return to fight the very monster that inspired his own creation. In celebration for the 30th anniversary of Toho Studios, the world would see King Kong finally go head-to-head with Godzilla. When these two icons would first meet up, Kong would quickly realize that he is outgunned by the power of Godzilla's atomic breath, causing him to bail out of this first match, giving the Big G an easy victory, setting the count to 2 wins and 0 losses. Unfortunately for Kong, he would be knocked out and carried back in for yet another fight. After trying to hide, he would be forced into combat, and this time he is actually able to build up enough courage to tank one of Godzilla's atomic blasts. And to his astonishment, it doesn't do that much damage, giving him the confidence that he'll need to stay in this fight. Even so, Godzilla is still able to get the upper hand, showing off his own agility after he dodges a lunging Kong, sending the giant ape slamming headfirst into a mountainside, knocking him out momentarily. Godzilla was about to start the era off at 3-0, when we would see the first of many power-ups to kaiju that would happen throughout the different eras of the franchise, when Kong suddenly becomes charged up by lightning. This would give Kong the extra edge that he would need to stand toe-to-toe with the King of Monsters, swinging the momentum towards his own direction. Even with Kong now going on the offensive, the fight would eventually be cut short when the two of them would fall off of the island into the ocean. According to Toho Studios, this was a win for Kong as he surfaces and heads home for his island while Godzilla makes no further appearance. In the Japanese version, you can hear the roars of both kaiju, although in the American version, only Kong's roar can be heard at the end. Some fans would call this a draw, and that makes sense to me, given that Godzilla can breathe underwater just fine. So this one could either be a no contest draw or a loss, and the same could actually be said for their first brief encounter, but we'll come back and revisit these fights at the end of the video. King Kong vs. Godzilla brought the box office success that Toho needed in order to continue with the series, and it also brought Godzilla further into the homes of fans around the world. Toho obviously wanted to keep a good thing going, so they looked to another popular solo film monster to face off with, this time looking no further than their own creation with Mothra. To this point, we've already seen Godzilla kill the first iteration of Anguirus, and then face off with the most famous movie monster at the time, with King Kong. So fighting a big fuzzy moth should be no problem, right? Well, surprisingly, Mothra in her imago form was able to hold her own against Godzilla at first, but sensing her own mortality and or the imminent defeat to Godzilla, she began to release her powder-like scales as a last effort attack and would eventually die, giving Godzilla the victory for this first match. But as any fan of Mothra knows, when she dies, there are always young ones waiting to follow. So now with Godzilla sitting at a win-loss record of 3-0, the larvae would try to avenge their fallen mother in a fight that no one saw happening before their first viewing. The little Mothra larva would actually go on to defeat the Big G, rendering him unable to fight on once they've coated him with enough webbing, bringing Godzilla back down to Earth and down to a ranking of 3 wins and 1 loss. As if the fights against King Kong and Mothra weren't hard enough for the Showa era's second Godzilla, he would now have to come face to face with his soon-to-be arch-nemesis in King Ghidorah. The space kaiju would be so powerful that he would get top billing, with Godzilla's name not even making it on the American title. The first fight here, however, would not involve the 3-headed monster, and instead would be between Godzilla and yet another crossover Toho kaiju with Rodan. The flying A-bomb would hold its own, and even though he lacked the knockout power to end the fight, he took everything Godzilla threw at him without injury, making this a no contest draw. Once King Ghidorah appeared, a young Mothra larva tried to convince Rodan and Godzilla to stop fighting in order to take on the new threat. Not wanting to help the humans, the two turned down the offer, only to end up helping out anyway after seeing how brave the larva was in taking on Ghidorah alone. Combined, the 3 of them were able to drive off the evil space kaiju, bringing Godzilla's record up to 4 wins and 1 loss. King Ghidorah would return again for Invasion of the Astro Monster or Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, where Godzilla would still need help in order to defeat the towering beast. With Mothra out of the picture this time, Rodan alone would help the Big G even out the odds. and it was evident in the film that the two of them were enough to do the job, as in both encounters, Rodan and Godzilla were able to chase off the evil space kaiju, giving 2 more wins to the Big G, who now sits at 6 wins and only 1 loss. As if needing a break from fighting some of the most deadly kaiju that Toho could throw at him, Godzilla would now be able to rack up some easy wins for the next few films. He would go on to beat Ebra the sea monster twice, along with a comedic victory of the giant condor, jumping up to a 9-1 record, only to fight even more lower tier monsters with victories over several Kamakuras, along with the giant spider Kumonga, catapulting Godzilla to 11 wins. Destroy All Monsters wouldn't really be a fair fight, with Godzilla and pretty much everyone else teaming up against the mighty King Ghidorah. But if you count this lopsided fight, then the Big G is now at 12-1.
Technically,
now I'm not going to count the fights from Godzilla's Revenge, as that movie was all a dream, so the events didn't really happen. But if you want to include those fights here, go ahead. But I'm going to skip it, so that brings us to Godzilla vs. Hedorah, the Smog Monster. Here we would finally see the Big G get put to the test once again. Short of dying in his first film, this would be the worst beating that Godzilla would take up to this point in the era. The first match would end in a no contest draw when Godzilla tossed Hedorah across the city. And he would barely win the final fight, even with the assistance of the humans and many tries, giving him the most hard-fought victory to date with a win-loss record of 13-1. Once the Big G was able to heal up from his brutal fight with Hedorah the Smog Monster, he would be tested once again by having a rematch with King Ghidorah, who this time was accompanied by fellow space kaiju Gigan. With only Anguirus, the two would wage an uphill battle in order to defy the odds and win the day. Between Gigan drawing blood on both Anguirus and Godzilla, along with the Big G having to basically fight Ghidorah on his own, this is actually one of the more impressive wins of the era, giving Godzilla a 14-win and 1-loss record. After not learning his lesson before, Gigan would return for the next outing from the Godzilla Showa era, teaming up this time with Megalon in order to punish the surface dwellers and overpower the monster-sized Jet Jaguar. It would be Jet Jaguar's own luck that would come into play, however, when Godzilla would enter the fray for an even fight. In another tough 2-on-2 matchup, Godzilla would use the help of Jet Jaguar in order to get past the firepower of these two kaiju so as to get close enough to do some real melee damage. With almost human-like abilities, the two would use tag team-like wrestling skills in order to embarrass their foes by the fight's end, bringing the Big G to an awesome 15-1 standing. With only 2 films left in the era, Godzilla would have to face off with his own doppelganger in the first incarnation of Mechagodzilla. An alien creation, the Showa version of Mechagodzilla was a powerhouse unlike anything else seen in the era. When Godzilla first encountered Mecha G, it wore a skin making it look like an exact copy of Godzilla, except for its atomic blast, which was yellow in color, and had a devastating effect on the Big G. It may have been that Godzilla was just caught off guard by seeing what he initially thought could be another member of his own species. But in this first matchup, Godzilla was easily handled by Mechagodzilla, having to retreat into the ocean, leaving behind a pool of his own blood and adding a loss to his now 15-2 record. The Islanders would then wake up King Caesar to help defend their home against Mecha G, yet he would be no match for the Space Titanium built robot. When King Caesar battled with Mecha G, he was easily outmatched, but Godzilla would return to fight once again. Mechagodzilla would do serious damage to Godzilla, drawing even more blood from him than Gigan was able to do. But in the end, the Big G was able to pull out an electromagnetic power-up to be able to draw in the Metal Menace close enough to be able to finish him off, landing Showa's second G at 16 wins to only 2 losses. For Terror of Mechagodzilla, the Big G would have to fight alone against an upgraded Mecha G who now had the assistance of Titanosaurus. Unfortunately for Titanosaurus, his first matchup with Godzilla would be one-on-one, and without the help of Mecha G, he would be severely outmatched, losing easily, putting Godzilla at 17-2. At the film's climax, however, the Big G would have to face off with both kaiju. For the most part, the humans kept Titanosaurus out of the fight, letting Godzilla focus on his metal doppelganger. The fight may not have been as bloody as before, but it was just as brutal, with Mechagodzilla unleashing a ranged barrage unlike anything ever seen.
He actually lost that one too. Okay, they should consider
this
like,
attack would
he
literally catch the Godzilla suit on fire, with the Big G pressing on through damage that would have dropped him in the last film. With sheer determination, he would eventually get close enough, knowing that he could rip the head off and end the fight. Unfortunately though, one of the upgrades to the mech was a metal skull, if you will, under the headpiece, which contained what seemed to be an even more powerful version of its beam attack. When the humans were able to briefly shut off the control to the robot kaiju, Godzilla took full advantage, throwing Mecha G like a toy and blowing it up with a charged up atomic breath. Finishing off Titanosaurus on his own was easy enough, leaving the Showa version of the Big G at a fight record of 18-2. So at 18-2, or 17-3, depending on where you sit on the Kong matchup, the Showa era Godzilla easily has the most fight experience of any other version of Godzilla. It should be noted, however, that the Showa era's Godzilla was no stranger to kaiju team-ups and assistance from the humans. He teamed up with everyone for Destroy All Monsters and also fought alongside Rodan, Mothra, Anguirus, King Caesar, and even Jet Jaguar when needed, usually against the overmatched King Ghidorah. He also may not have been able to defeat Hedorah or Mecha G and Titanosaurus without the aid of the humans. Yet with all of that said, you gotta give Showa's G credit where credit is due. The second Godzilla of the era faced off with more kaiju than any other version of Godzilla, and never stopped fighting, still living on today in the Showa universe. I hope you guys enjoyed this look at the wins and losses of the Showa era's second Godzilla. Next time, I want to take a look at Godzilla of the Heisei era. So until then, your likes, comments, shares, and subscriptions go a long way towards helping the channel grow. Thanks again, and I hope to see you next time.
Yeah. I'm gonna watch the second one tomorrow. Cause I would love to see the Heisei era. Well, I hope y'all like that video. Pretty good. This is Dark Light. Y'all want to talk to me with about some Godzilla? My Twitter's right here. Anywhere is it gonna pop up somewhere? Maybe. Whenever it pops up. But yeah. Contact me on Twitter, send a comment. Y'all want to become a part of the angels, the nerdy angels. Subscribe. It's Dark Light, and I'll catch y'all in another video. Cheerio.